about kind of doing a recap of yesterday. And I realized that would probably be better off, based on some of the questions yesterday, to talk about mobility management. I know that some of you are old hands at it, especially those of you who also have the transit district. But for the rest of you, especially a lot of the new folks coming in, I figured it would be worth it to share the way that TxDOT handles mobility management and also to kind of go over what's involved. So let me get PowerPoint set up. And so I put this together last night. Apologies if it is not my most polished presentation, but I think it'll be okay. Get to sharing my screen. Screen 2. All right. So we want to talk about mobility management and what costs are allowed in the Section 5310 program. I know that Section 5311 for the rural transit districts can also pay for mobility management, but I believe that a majority of the funding does come out of 5310. And there's some well-established programs across the state so far. Not everyone takes advantage of it. I say takes advantage of it. You'll see. Let's see. Make sure. There we go. Okay. So first, I'd like to cover a little bit about Section 5310 if you're not familiar with it. And I'm going to do the forbidden thing and just read off the slide, because the language that they use in the circular is very particular, and I think it's very important. So the purpose is to improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities through the country by removing barriers to transportation services and expanding the transportation mobility options available. So one thing that I take out of this is that it is a holistic view about expanding and removing barriers. So that would be the theme, what to take from this. So who is eligible to apply? Private nonprofits that serve seniors and individuals with disabilities, and also local government agencies that serve seniors and individuals with disabilities. The rural and small urban transit districts, and private shared ride taxi. And just an important note on the private shared ride taxi, that doesn't include ride sharing services like Uber and Lyft. But you'll see on here, a COG or a regional planning organization isn't necessarily eligible to apply themselves, but chances are you do, or you should have partners who are the private nonprofits and other government agencies who serve seniors and individuals with disabilities. So like we were talking yesterday about the stakeholders and the partners, this is an opportunity to work with those organizations and help them coordinate, help them put together a stronger application, and be able to advance mobility management in your region. So the big thing about 5310 projects, they have to be in concurrence with the plans that y'all are doing right now, which is good news. And the projects have to be designed to address a gap or objective that's identified and prioritized in the plan. So this is where having the input of the agencies who get or will be seeking 5310 funding is most important, because the closer you can link all of the objectives with the different agencies, the better you'll be able to prepare for the future and hopefully get funding. So the mission of mobility management in particular, this can be defined a lot of different ways. There are a lot of organizations that talk about this. There's actually a National Center for Mobility Management. I'll post a link to their site in the forum. They are a fantastic resource. They go by NCMM. They give a lot of general information, but basically the way that we've practiced at TxDOT, the mission is to increase access to healthcare, employment, education, and other life-sustaining activities, looking at the individual needs and the role of coordination. So the real kernel to funding at TxDOT is that the eligible activities must have a direct relationship to transportation access. When you talk mobility management, you can get into very large concepts, and it gets a little tricky from a funding perspective for TxDOT to be able to determine what's eligible. So we've divided it up into some specific categories. As with every grant program, there isn't enough Section 5310 funding to cover all of the needs in the state. They get about $7 million a year for programs, and that gets split over all of the TxDOT districts. So it gets divided up pretty quickly.
Carrie, is there supposed to be a slide here?
Oh, yes, there is. Let's see. Why is that not sharing? Oh yeah, it says it's not sharing. Okay, let's try that again. Sorry, y'all. I will post a copy of this presentation so that you can see the slides that you missed, which I pretty much just read off them, so you should be okay. Okay, so now you can see a slide. Hopefully. It says on my side that it's sharing.
Yes, we can see it.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Okay, so this is the important part to be able to read anyway. So the 4 general categories of activities that are eligible for Section 5310 mobility management funding would be straight up enabling mobility access, coordination, which is the one that should be ringing bells for everyone right now, technology, and public education. And that public education should also be one where everyone kind of pricks up their ears. All right, so enabling access is directly related to getting folks rides. So trip planning, ride referrals, centralized information on resources, the concept of putting together something that's, they call it a no wrong door, but basically if somebody needs services, if they contact any of your partners or stakeholders, they can be directed to the right person to talk to for that service. So even if they're, ended up calling a nutrition center and need transportation, they can be directed toward the transportation. That's a really great way to set up a network in a community. And it can also be used for travel training, which I think I mentioned yesterday, is sort of working with the individual and getting them set up so that they can travel either where they weren't able to use demand response before, to be able to do that, to use flex route, or even to get to the point where they can use the regular fixed route on their own and therefore have better access. One thing I do want to point out quick, and I think I forgot to mention this, mobility management can't cover general operating expenses. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It can't cover paying for the drivers. It doesn't cover the actual transportation. And it's also not just a dispatch service. So let's see, travel training, there we go. Okay, so coordination, this is really the key. So there are the agencies that serve the same population. 5310 is specific to seniors and individuals with disabilities. I know that the plans range. There are several more demographics that are specifically called out to be served in the plans, but this would be a place to look, and a lot of their needs would be similar. So sharing services, coordinating the uses of vehicles with other nonprofits. I know that's something that's mentioned in the plan when you're doing your inventory, seeing what resources are being underutilized, and seeing, I know that in 5310, we'd seen where a smaller agency would get a vehicle and put very few miles on it over the course of the time that they have it, because they themselves don't necessarily have the demand to be using it as much as it could be. So that might be an opportunity for a couple of agencies to be sharing a vehicle, or to have some agreement with the transit district to be accessing a vehicle. Also expanding the availability of service among the existing providers and bringing in other transportation providers. Short-term management to plan and implement coordination services, and improving transportation service efficiency and effectiveness. So this is a pretty broad category. When it comes to all of these things, I definitely recommend that you talk to your PTC. They will be able to guide you in terms of what activities would be eligible for reimbursement. And I can't say it enough, they're fantastic resources. Another topic that would be eligible under mobility management is technology. This is, I think Katie mentioned yesterday that they had an app now. So like a one call, one click travel center, an app would have to be accessible. Coordinating your vehicle scheduling, intelligent transportation technologies, technologies that track costs and billing in a coordinated system, so that can be more efficiently handled, especially if you'd be billing different agencies in coordination to provide the service. And single smart customer payment systems. So in these days, that might be looking at contactless fare systems, or ways for different individuals, especially crossing different providers, to be able to use the same fare system, just as some examples. Public education is also something that can be covered, and it's got to cover the transit services and the benefits of mobility management for the population. And this is one where you definitely need to talk to your PTC, because there's a fine line between public education and marketing. Public education provides information about the service, contact information, and its specific benefits for this senior and individual disability population. Marketing tends to be something where it just has the agency name on a thing. And this is, you start looking at what's the difference between a pamphlet, a map, getting into chip clips and water bottles. So this is where you'll want to talk to your PTC for sure, to look at your plan and what you are interested in doing. So just a kind of an overview of the eligible mobility management expenses. You've got the staff, the folks who are actually doing mobility management, that covers for the percentage of time they're doing the mobility management activities. You can have more than one person, of course, and the managers, the mobility manager, the mobility manager supervisor, the percentage of time they spend working with mobility managers. The activities, talking to customers, getting the ride schedules, doing the travel training, the coordination meetings, and the outreach events. You'll want to talk to your PTC specifically about what kind of outreach events and what's being covered. If it's a general promoting the agency, that isn't necessarily going to be eligible. And then communications equipment. This kind of falls under technology as well, but a phone and cell phone for your mobility manager so they can be more readily accessible. Their computer software for mobility management, the internet connection that would be based on the percentage that's used by the mobility manager, your public education materials, and your postage. There's a common theme here in that in practice, what PTN has done is really to limit reimbursement for mobility management activities to specifically what is mobility management. And that's entirely motivated by the limitation in funding, and because mobility management can become such a large thing. But I would say that it is, there's ample opportunity to take advantage of the coordination and to bring in additional funding services for these activities. These are also the kind of activities that can get you foundation funding and potentially funding from health and human service partners, those kinds of things. There's a lot of opportunity in here. So just wanted to cover that so y'all can have that in mind. Actually went over a little bit,